Happy Friday, everyone. So the story is, last Christmas, I built for my girlfriend a Christmas tale in Tilt Brush. I don't know if you heard about Tilt Brush. It's a VR equivalent of Microsoft Paint, kind of. I spent about 25 hours at night in my headset looking ridiculous, and she didn't get it at all. Why? Bad UX, terrible UX. So that's why I'm here today, is really so you don't make the same mistakes and keep your girlfriends and stuff like that. So I've always been fascinated by storytellers and storytelling. I've done bad Christmas tales, I've done bad movies, bad music. And so when I started my career, I started telling stories for brands on social and digital. And then this happens, not really back in 1888, but 1888 is the date when Vincent van Gogh painted the Night Cafe. Right, you all know that painting, it's super famous. And 3 years ago, I donned an Oculus DK1, so the very old Oculus, and I did a Night Cafe VR experience. And so suddenly I was inside that world. I was inside the Night Cafe, completely surrounded, and I could walk around freely. And there was, as a storytelling fan, there was a life-changing moment for me. It felt like, I don't know, the birth of cinema or something. So I quit my job and I started somewhere else, where we said, well, let's just help brands and innovators and daring people in general to tell their stories in that new medium. So, few stuff we've done. On the top left here is something we've done to the UEFA, and we let a 6-year-old kid feel like they've actually won the trophy. Which might happen to my favorite team, Paris Saint-Germain, this year, but that's another story. The second one here on the right, and I think the computer doesn't really like when there's a lot of GIFs at the same time. The second one was for a TV show in France. And the story is that of a girl who's been kidnapped and put in a basement for 5 years, drugged up. She had a baby there, super happy story. And then she wakes up one day, the drugs are wearing off, and the baby's gone. And she needs to find that baby, but she also needs to suppress the memories. So there's this kind of struggle between the two. And so what we built is an escape room, like a physical, real escape room, that recreates where she was held captive. And you enter 2 people in that room. And there's a headset dangling from the ceiling. And so one of the 2 is going to put on the headset, and is going to find himself or herself in that very same room, but at a different moment in time, with slightly hallucinogenic stuff. And collaborating together, one in VR, one in real life, you have 45 minutes to escape the room and save the baby. The third one is also for a French TV show somehow, and if you don't know it, Le Bureau des légendes, watch it, it's very good. I think it's on Channel 4 or something. It's also very similar to Homeland in a way. And we were contacted and they said, oh, let's film a press conference in 360. Right? And that's an absolutely terrible idea for many reasons. The first being people don't watch press conferences. And so what we did is we asked ourselves, what is the ultimate dream of any fan of any TV show? And you want to be cooking mess with Walter White. You want to be on the North Wall. So we created the first VR spin-off of a TV show, and you spend 6 minutes in the shoes of a wannabe spy on a mission in Paris. And the last one, I'm going to move so you can kind of see it. That was for Adidas. We released that a couple weeks ago. And we partnered with Adidas and 2 famous US climbers. And they climb a mountain in Corsica. And in this experience, it's a HTC Vive experience, so you can walk around. You're first going to see a little bit of the climb in 360 video, get a feel for the reality of what those guys did. Then you're going to see the mountain from afar, as if you were a god, as they progress. And at some point, like it happened in real life, the girl Delaney falls down. When that happens, you're teleported into her body, and you have to complete the climb yourself. So that gives you an idea of the kind of experiences I'm going to talk about today, and variety of them as well. So none of those experiences would have worked as a film, really, and none of them would have worked as a video game. It's a third way of sorts. And so VR requires a new storytelling language, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But before that, to explain kind of the impact that VR can have on behaviors, I want to talk to you about an experience. So that was done in Barcelona about 2 years ago, and it took a whole bunch of students, and they recreated some avatars of every single student. But half of them got an avatar that was themselves, about 20-year-olds, and half of them get an avatar of themselves, 70-year-olds. Okay? They then put them in VR in front of a mirror where they could see themselves in the mirror moving, and they asked them to do a lot of stuff, like singing and dancing and playing the bongos and stuff like that. And obviously, people didn't do the same stuff depending on how they perceive themselves. But you could argue, well, it's like Halloween. If you're dressed as the Dracula or Sexy Rabbit, you're not going to behave the same way. So there was a questionnaire after the experience, and every single question was completely bullshit. The only question that mattered was, we just paid you €1,000 to do that, and we want to know how you're going to spend it. Are you going to go party tonight? €1,000, good party. Are you going to, save for holidays? Are you going to give a present to a friend? Are you going to save for later? And the people who had been in their old self body for a few minutes were on average saving 3 times more money. Okay? At no point we talked about money or anything like that. It's just a completely subconscious behavior. Second fun fact about that experience, they asked those students to go to the next room, which was on the other side of the campus. The people who had been in their old body for a few minutes took 30% more time to walk there. So that gives you, and I'm saying that not because it's fun, I'm saying that because you have responsibility as VR storytellers in terms of how you impact people behavior. So let's go through the basics of storytelling. VR is user experience as a whole. When I'm saying that, I mean, you're not playing with a device that someone is going to hold and interact with reality or not. You're building that reality itself. So it's the most holistic design experience that you can dream of. And the first difference with every medium before it is this idea of the story world. Okay, there's no frame. You are in that world. You're living inside the story. It's all around you. And what that means is you're not a spectator anymore. You are a visitor to the story. And it goes even further. I don't know if you can see it, it's quite blurry, but that's the shower scene from Psycho, right? The most overanalyzed scene in the history of cinema. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's very violent and shocking, and it's not gory at all. It's all about that stabbing noise, the various shots, and that is what a director does. It's the magic of editing. That whole violence is all happening in your head. There's nothing on the screen that is gory. All the gore happens in your head. Similarly here, I could write something about right here, right now, or film it and make it feel like it's a giant dating group or a sect or whatever that is. But in VR you can't really do that because you don't have the editing, but something else happens. And Chris Milk said it quite well. So VR is the first medium that actually makes the jump from our own interpretation of an author's expression of an experience that's convoluted, but you know what I mean, to us experience it firsthand. In all of the mediums, your consciousness interprets the medium. In VR, your consciousness is the medium. So we're starting to get why VR is so special. And now I want to go kind of step by step, starting by the basics, into what it takes to tell stories in VR. You probably all heard about presence. So presence is when you trick your brain into believing that you are somewhere you're not. So typically VR. Presence is not like a marketing bullshit term, right? Presence is a neurologically measurable phenomenon. If you don't reach presence as designers, you have failed because it's the whole point of VR. So you might remember the Maslows Pyramid of needs from your early days in school. Starts with like physiological needs, and then kind of safety, all the way self-esteem, self-actualization. So it's kind of the same idea but applied to VR. At the very base of the pyramid, you have comfort, which is can I use it and not die? The second one is interpretability. Does it all make sense? And we'll talk about the rest later. So comfort. Number one, do not make your audience puke. Seems fairly basic, but you would be surprised how many experiences still make people nauseous. And the book of how to make people not puke is still being written. It all has to do with trajectories and speed and horizons, but be very, very careful for that. The second point is stay away from the uncanny valley. So you're probably familiar with the uncanny valley. It's we can identify with a very symbolic objects, think WALL-E, for example, where we have emotions even though there's no words, all the way to a proper human being. But as you get very close to human beings, you enter the territory of like sex dolls and zombies. And that makes your brain very queasy. It doesn't know what it's dealing with. So unless you are actually designing an experience that has zombies or sex dolls or both of them, try to stay away from that. Moving up the pyramid a little bit, we're going to talk about something which is called the Fidelity Contract. The Fidelity Contract comes from what we call natural behavioral response. So if you're in VR and a zombie jumps at you, you're going to have a jump scare. Very different from what you have in a cinema or playing a video game on your screen. That jump scare is going to be the exact same as if it happened in real life. Similarly, if you play a multiplayer VR game and someone comes too close to you to talk to you, they're invading your privacy and you're going to step back. So your reactions in VR are akin to the same as what you would do in real life, which is fantastic for storytellers, but it comes with a price. The price is users are expecting the VR reality to be the same as in real life. So for example, if there's a doorknob, you have to be able to open the door. Okay, if there's a cup with liquid, you have to be able to drink it. If there's an object, you have to be able to throw it away. So you have to think about all of those things that a user might want to do in that reality. If you don't, if you break presence, again, the experience is dead. So first element, make your environment livable if you want, and also make it safe. Okay, I don't know if you can see this guy. He was playing a climbing game. He missed a hold, and he wanted to lean against the rock, and he fell over. And if he had fell like 15 degrees to the left, he might be dead. And it's the same. Like there's a game where you play snooker, and obviously everyone who played it do like this, and they start leaning on the table where there's none. So you really have to think about the fact that people accept what they have as reality. So everything they're going to interact with has to either exist in reality or not be there at all. Last thing on that present stuff is very little about UI. In VR, there's no distance between the input and the output. Okay, so when you play a video game, we've all press A to do a jump or kill someone. Now that doesn't happen anymore. What you do in reality translates immediately in VR. That's very relating to the Fidelity Contract. The gift that's on the right comes from a game called Job Simulator that happens in 2050 when there's no jobs anymore, and it's a game where you play working in an office. And it's very interesting to watch people playing it. So you can make some tea, for example. And some people would make tea by putting the tea bag directly in the kettle. All right? Some other people, typically British people, would actually wash the cup before starting to make the tea. It's a silly example, but it gives you an idea of how much people believe they are there. One last thing on here. If you look closely, you can see that the hand disappears as soon as the cup is grabbed. Okay, and that's called the tomato presence. They discovered that when you grab an object, you don't need the hand anymore. The object takes that function. So there are a lot of discovery in UX. It doesn't have to be just like reality. It can be just a little bit more. So we talked about kind of the basics of not making people puking or dying and stuff like that. Now let's go a little bit deeper into storytelling. That's the big question, right? We are trying to mold an experience into a story. Okay, none of the storytelling tools we have prepared for that. So how do we tell a story for the audience when the audience is in the story? That's basically the big challenge here. So yeah, we're on the top of the pyramid, and we can start talking about audience experience design. So that's another experience that was done. It's based on the story of this Japanese kid, an exchange student in the US who killed himself. And they wanted to know how people would react if they were to observe the life of that kid just a few weeks before he killed himself. And so what they did is they built an experience where people would live in 90 degrees, 180 or 360. But it's not real VR. Okay, they have plastic goggles that they can see through and like black walls. And what happens is people in 90 degrees, They go very like a detective. They're obsessed by detail. They know the score in the game he's playing. They're obsessing about the crumbled cookie and and who eats cookie like that. And the answer is not the kid because someone from the staff left it there. People become very detective. Whereas the people in 360, they don't know any of those details, but they're going to tell you, he felt empty, he felt lonely. I get that he was not in a good place in his life. So depending on how much room you have, you're going to go from a more cognitive approach to things, more detective approach to things, all the way to more emotional. And that's the idea of audience experience design. Already 5 minutes, wow. Is you have to you have to take into account the physical aspect of the experience, which we mentioned, the cognitive and the emotional as well. There's obviously a struggle between the field of view, so the red square is what I see at any moment, and the rest. And the question is, as a storyteller, how do you solve that struggle? How do you get people to see what you want them to see? A lot of people at first say, oh, you have to be like a matador, you know, with a bull. You have to trick the spectator in looking where you want to look. But if that's what you want to do, if you know precisely what you want them to see at which moment, then make a film. That's not the point of VR, okay? The point of VR is as I said, like human-centered design, ontological design. If I'm sitting next to someone and that person is in a hospital, a dance club, a library, or the church, our relationship and the way that people are going to behave in the entire space is going to be completely different. And so in VR, the space is the story. Okay, we are designing people through space, and that's why VR is probably closer to architecture in a way than it is to actual script writing. Has any one of you heard about a guy named McDowell, Alex McDowell? He was the production designer on Minority Report. So Minority Report is absolutely classic. And when asked, you know, how come Minority Report is still a classic and that world is so coherent, he said, we flipped something when we did Minority Report. Normally when you do a film, the script is written, you know, like 50 versions, final locked, and then they give that to someone and they say, all right, now you build a world around it. Minority Report, they did the opposite. They went to Alex first and they say, give me the politics, give me the transportation system, give me the social classes. And he builds all of that, and then they had the script. And so if you think about Star Wars, for example, it's the same. Most of you could probably write a novel that happens in the Star Wars world that doesn't involve any of the main characters, because stories can emerge from that world. So he goes one step further than Chris Milk. He says, storytelling is the way in which we make sense of the world around us, and the design of a well-researched, richly detailed world becomes a platform for multiple stories to emerge. And what that means for VR is, yes, we go from the author-directed control of the gaze to something else, but that something else is not only that we are building the story as we wish, is that we are building relationships with the worlds and with the character within that story. What's important here when you talk about the matador is, don't try to make people look at what you want them to look. Do the opposite, you know. Try to tell a story to people wherever they look. Let me give you an example. Oh, that's not actually done well. That one is interesting. Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man 1, this is the big gloom, he just lost his uncle, this is the saddest moment, all right? Now everyone says, it could be cool to like choose your own adventure type film. It is, but this is the moment where you feel a lot for him. Now, if I tell you that you can say something nice, ignore him or slap him in the face, you're laughing, you probably want to slap him, but in any case you have completely lost any empathy for him. All right, so there is a trade-off between empathy and interactivity. So be careful, depending on what you want to say, how much interactivity you can do. But there's a trick around that, which is subconscious interactivity. So depending on where I look, I can trigger the next scene. Depending on how I move my body, I can trigger the next scene. So this is a way to tell a story depending on what people do, as opposed to forcing it down the throat. And one interesting example of that is Gnomes and Goblins. Gnomes and Goblins is a Jon Favreau experience in a magical forest with gnomes, and they go around you and they get like dried fruit and stuff like that, and you don't know what to do. There's no manual, there's no score, there's no nothing. You don't know what to do. After a while, you realize you have to give them fruit. So you approach them, you pick something, you approach it, and you do that. And they go away because you're 10 times taller than them, right? So after a while, you understand that the only way to progress in the game is to go down on your knees, literally, be very slow with your hands, put it on the floor, step back. Then the gnome comes, takes the fruit and scurries away and gives you a golden key. The only thing that's properly experienced in that case is your body. Okay, so you are starting to build story based on the body. The main idea today is we need a new breed of storytellers, and those guys are storyscapers. And it's a mix of scriptwriter, it's a mix of architect, composer, it's a mix of everything. And I strongly encourage you to consider that in VR, you're not playing with words or images, you're playing with states of being. That's what you want. And finally, and this is my last slide, don't worry, I encourage you to become storyscapers, to build the experiences in which people are going to live. They are going to build their own story, and those experiences have to be transformative. So put the human at the center and give them a transformative story, and you will still have a lot of fun in the process, because this is the closer there is in design to basically being God. On that note, thank you. We're somewhere else. All the details are here if you want to talk, and yeah, have a good afternoon.